The General Data Protection Regulation is due to come into force on the 25th of May 2018. Lots of businesses are getting very worried about what this means for them and what they actually need to do in order to get compliant in readiness for that date. There's lots of scaremongering going on the internet, particularly about the levels of fines that are going to be imposed, about the fact that from day one the Information Commission is going to be slapping hefty fines on very minor offences. And so we see it as our role to try to inform and educate businesses that we look after in terms of what they do need to do and how they need to prioritise their processing activities. So there are several new concepts under the GDPR, but the general intention of the regulation is to create enhanced rights for data subjects and to provide for greater transparency of processing by businesses. So as part of that, we're seeing an increased level of requirement around consent, specifically for direct marketing. It needs to be freely given, specific, informed. Effectively, a positive action needs to be seen when giving consent for direct marketing. In terms of transparency, there are obligations now in relation to privacy notices, just increased information that needs to be provided to individuals about the type of data that's being processed about them, what's going to be done with it, and businesses even need to think about the legal basis for each type of processing, each type of personal data. So the individual really does or should have access to a lot of information about what businesses are doing with the information about them. There are a number of steps that businesses can take to start their programme of compliance towards meeting GDPR requirements. And the first one is really raising awareness within the business. So it's really important to gather the relevant individuals within the business, sit down and talk about what actions need to be taken in order to meet compliance. And that might involve getting in auditors to carry out an audit. It might involve doing that internally, but either way, it's just really important to really get everybody up to speed on what steps need to be taken and the importance of understanding general data protection regulation. As part of that meeting, it will be important to establish how you're going to raise awareness amongst the rest of the organisation. Whilst you might have a meeting with senior managers, it's important that everybody in the organisation is aware of what's coming and what they're going to have to do individually to meet compliance. Stage 2, you will need to review all the data that you hold. Now, this might involve doing a full-blown audit of the whole organisation, or you might want to take the organisation and break it down into parts. So, for example, undertake an HR audit or an audit of all the customer data that you process. But the important thing to do is to understand exactly who you process information about, what kind of data you process about them, and the legal justifications for doing that processing. It's really important that businesses understand one of the new requirements of the regulations are to be as transparent as possible about the processing. So what will come out of that audit is a clear understanding of all the processing that you undertake, and making sure that you have a record of that will be of paramount importance. Stage 3 is about understanding your policies and procedures that you've got in place currently and working out if you need to make changes to those as part of the compliance programme needed for GDPR. The regulation does require businesses to tell individuals a lot more now about what they do with their data, the reasons they hold it, the legal justifications for holding that information. And that's all part of the transparency principle that is new to the General Data Protection Regulation. Not just policies though, procedures are really important. So businesses will need to establish, if they haven't already got them, a specific procedure for looking at subject access requests. In other words, where an individual asks a business about the information that they hold about it. In addition, what does a business do when a complaint comes in? Dealing with that complaint efficiently is really, really important. Or dealing with a breach. If there is a data breach, businesses are now required to notify that breach within 72 hours of becoming aware of it. There are a number of steps that businesses can take to start their their programme of compliance towards meeting GDPR requirements. And the first one is really raising awareness within the business. So it's really important to gather the relevant individuals within the business, sit down and talk about what actions need to be taken in order to meet compliance. And that might involve getting in auditors to carry out an audit. It might involve doing that internally. But either way, it's just really important to really get everybody up to speed on what steps need to be taken and the importance of understanding general data protection regulation. As part of that meeting, it will be important to establish how you're going to raise awareness amongst the rest of the organisation. Whilst you might have a meeting with senior managers, it's important that everybody in the organisation is aware of what's coming and what they're going to have to do individually to meet compliance. Stage 4 is really about assessing how a business can react to the enhanced rights of data subjects. So, for example, under the regulation, individuals can request their data to be forgotten in certain circumstances. And business will really need to assess whether or not that is possible to permanently eradicate an individual's personal data. Individuals can also ask for their information to be minimised or to be corrected. And again, this obligation is effectively an obligation on the business to ensure that throughout every record that the business holds about an individual, it is corrected. In the next stage, it's important to look at the key areas of risk. Having done the data audit, it will hopefully have become apparent where there are issues of non-compliance or breach, and the business will need to decide whether that breach is so significant that it needs to be reported to the Information Commissioner's Office, or what can be done to rectify that. Having carried out your audit and understood what sort of information you're processing, it's important to create a plan of action. So you prioritise the red, amber, greens. Having understood all the areas of risk in the business as a result of the audit, it's then important to put in place an action plan and detail ways in which you're going to remedy those non-compliance areas. Stage 7 is about ongoing data protection compliance. So we all know that the General Data Protection Regulation comes in on the 25th of May, but it doesn't stop there. Businesses need to continue to monitor. So they will need to continue to look at policies and procedures and make sure they get updated from time to time as the business requires. Individuals will need to be updated with regards to their training. As new employees come into the business, they will need to receive training on the General Data Protection Regulation implications.